Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. So since we are baptized believers, it not only needs to be evident in the church, it also needs to be evident in our family relationships. Okay? There's stuff that we're dead to, no longer should be a part of it. Stuff that we're alive to, this is how we should relate to one another in our marriages and in our families. So he says here, for wives, following Jesus means submitting to your husbands. Okay? We've talked about that when we were in Ephesians. Husbands, following Jesus means loving your wife. We talked about that. And then we see this odd insertion here. And do not be harsh with them. Literally, this says that husbands are not to become irritated, angry, or embittered against their wife. And I think David Garland, in his commentary, might have the right idea here when he writes this. He says, this directive addresses the eventuality that the wife might not always be properly submissive, which in turn would likely trigger bitterness in her husband. And what Paul is saying is, husbands, don't get angry and nasty with your wife. Just love her and love her more. Well, then we have instructions to children and parents. For children, following Jesus includes obeying their parents. For parents, following Jesus includes not being so overbearing or controlling or protective that it leads to resentment. All right? And we'll quick finish this up. Verse 22 down into chapter 4. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything and do it, not only when their eyes are on you to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for their wrongs, and there is no favoritism. Masters, provide your slaves with what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven. So he's saying here that being baptized believers should also be evident in our working relationships. That's probably the closest parallel to slaves and masters in the Bible. Baptized slaves were to obey their masters and show them respect. They were to work hard when being watched and when not being watched. And when Paul says that they are to work at it with all their heart, he might be suggesting that they see their labor as actually a spiritual thing. So, how can work be an act of worship? Quality of work, okay. Who gave you that job? Yeah, Lord did, right? Yeah. And what is your job producing or accomplishing that is a blessing or a benefit to others? Okay, you're a mechanic on trucks. You kept those guys on the road safe, right? You kept all that cargo able to get from one place to another, and everybody who bought anything that was moved that way benefited from it. Yeah. So God used you in order to benefit and bless others in that job. That's right, yeah. One last comment, then we'll pray. And baptized slave masters, that's down into chapter 4, verse 1, so we'll pick it up at verse 2 next week. Baptized slave masters were to treat their slaves fairly because the master is a slave of Christ.